Welcome to the Damascus Road podcast. On the road to Damascus, Paul had a radical encounter with Jesus and his life was changed forever. That is what we hope and pray for here. Now, on to this week's episode.
So, I have a somewhat crippling fear of deep water. Actually, it's probably more accurate to say that I have a crippling fear of sharks that live in deep water. I honestly cannot even look at a picture of a shark without experiencing a thrill of horror and existential dread coursing through my body. Like, I'm not looking at this picture. Looking at this picture, I couldn't do it. I had to ask my producer, Tyler, to find some picture of sharks because actively searching sharks on Google Images would probably give me a heart attack. But I've been doing some exposure therapy, occasionally dabbling in some Shark Week or really leaning into shark horror films, Sharknado, The Meg, really terrifying stuff. But I suffer through it, slowly working my way up to actually turning the page in my son's Under the Ocean book that for some reason has a giant open mouth great white shark on it. I have to hold it like this because if it's farther away, it can't get you. But I think it was the ultimate shark movie that really spawned my fear of sharks, the classic Jaws. Now, we didn't watch a lot of scary movies in my house growing up, which I am eternally grateful to my mom for, because the number of scary images I have in my brain to pull up in the middle of the night is very, very small. But at about 12, I thought I could handle something scary. So I begged my mom to watch Jaws, and she relented. And we made popcorn and snuggled on the couch together and watched the shark movie of shark movies. And I felt very proud of myself afterwards because I was like, I don't even feel scared. I am so tough. But I failed to take into account that the number of experiences I had with large bodies of water in my day-to-day life was very, very small. It's easy to not feel afraid of sharks when you're on dry land. But I have this very distinct memory of shortly after watching the movie Jaws, going to the swimming pool with my siblings for their swimming lessons and jumping into the deep end per usual and suddenly being overcome with primitive terror. Holy crap, I thought in my 12-year-old brain. I had my goggles on and I looked beneath me and there wasn't floor, just endless depths, so much water, so much space for a gigantic shark to come shooting up out of the gloom and eat me alive. It took all of my wherewithal and focused breathing to make it out of that pool in my unglamorous doggy paddle without having a full-on panic attack. And that was just in the deep end of the pool. Don't even get me started about the ocean. In Finding Nemo, when they go to the drop-off, that is the most terrifying part of the movie. I hate it. It's so deep. We went to the ocean a couple summers ago and people were literally swimming out to the drop-off where suddenly there's nothing but empty ocean for thousands of feet beneath you. And they're acting like, oh, this is no big deal. And I should obviously want to partake in this super fun activity. No, thank you. You know what happened to Marlon's wife at the drop-off? Eaten by a barracuda. You know what else lives out in the drop-off? That's right, sharks. I'm not a fool. The deep is scary. Don't go in the deep. But I've been having a love-hate relationship recently with the ocean because there's more to the deep than absolute terror and sharks. I got several octopus books for Christmas because I'm still on an octopus kick, and learning about these clever cephalopods and their deep underwatery world has made me curious. What if there's something more to the deep? What if there is wonder and holy awe and a whole world of intricate, creative creatures living beneath the waves? Now, intellectually, I know that there's more than just sharks in the ocean, that there's all sorts of cool and amazing and astounding things down there. That I've spent so long swimming at the surface, avoiding the depths, that maybe I am missing out on something better, something richer, something more full than just empty water and terrifying swimming teeth. And I think for some of us, maybe for a lot of us, this is kind of what we experience in our relationship with God. Maybe there's fear or not much curiosity or just plain comfort being on land. But whatever it is, we often find ourselves skimming. we dabble in Christianity. We stay at the surface. We add a layer of Jesus to our lives, an addendum of 2 hours on Sunday, or a Bible study, or we sprinkle the dinner table with a few drops of grace and amen. Life is just too busy to go much deeper than that. And is any more than that really necessary? But like I've been getting curious about the ocean, I've been getting curious about what Jesus says in the Bible. Because though I've been a Christian for a long time, it seems like he's saying that there is something more. It seems like he's pointing to a life that I don't feel like I'm living. He says that life with him will be easy and light and gentle and marked by love. And maybe sometimes I feel like that, like on vacation. But is that my default? Is that your default? Do I feel gentle towards my son Aiden when I'm trying to wrestle him into his car seat and he's screaming at me? Does life feel easy when you log into Zoom for the 50th time this week? Does your day feel light when you wake up in the morning? Am I marked by love when I scroll through my Instagram or Facebook feed, alternately judging, hating, and dismissing people's stupid, inane, and misguided posts? This verse from 2 Corinthians has always troubled me. Paul says this means that anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new person. The old life is gone. A new life has begun. And this seems so encouraging, a new life. And I know that I've given my life to Christ. And I know that he promises that the old life is gone and the new life has begun. But is my current life, this current way of living, these current sin issues and judgmentalism and bitterness and anger and disconnection and dissatisfaction, is this the new life? Is this me, a new person? Because it sure feels a lot like me before Christ. Just as selfish and hurtful and dissatisfied as before. It feels frankly like someone who isn't even following God at all. Does new really mean anything? Or is this the best it's going to get? Am I missing something? Is there something deeper? And I think that there is. And I think that Jesus says there is. I think that Jesus meant what he said through Paul, that when we do life with him, we become new. But how? How do I get from here, the bitter, angry, hurt person, to there, the life that is easy and light and full of joy? Is there even possible? Because what I'm doing right now still seems to be just skimming the surface and nothing has really changed. This is why deep is one of our core values at DR, which we're exploring in this series, because we believe that the Christian life is more than just skimming the surface. We believe that following Jesus is a whole new way to live, that what Jesus says about new life in him is true, that there's more to this than just Sunday school and a veneer of nice. We believe that there is an old life, an old way of doing things, and that truly deep, transformative change is possible in God. And we believe that it is through going deep with Jesus that we experience this real transformation, that we grow and change and become not just angry, lightly depressed, and lonely people with a Christian label slapped on top, but deeply, profoundly, fundamentally rewired into the image of Christ. So as cold and wet and scary as the deep may be, let's explore it together and see what the deep may hold for our lives. So, speaking of being curious about the Bible, I think Jesus has diagnosed the problem for us of this disconnect that we're experiencing between what he says and what life actually feels like. So this is from the book of Matthew. He's explaining to his friends a story that he just told that had a lot of metaphor and symbolism, and his friends were not English majors, so Jesus spelled it out for them and for us. This is the parable of the seed, if you're familiar. The seed on the rocky soil represents those who hear the message and immediately receive it with joy. These people who hear the message and receive it with joy are probably pretty similar to you and me. You've accepted Christ. You've decided to become a Christian. But Jesus continues. But since they don't have deep roots, they don't last long. They fall away as soon as they have problems. Jesus says that our issue is not that we haven't chosen him, not that we're not really Christians, but that we don't have deep roots. We fall away as soon as we have problems. And this makes a lot of sense. It is really difficult to develop new habits and break old ones. And we all grew up with broken people and broken families. No matter how perfect you thought your family was, I promise it was at least a little broken. And as we're growing up in our families of origin, we learn and inhabit all of these ways of interacting and dealing with the world in order to make sense of it, in order to survive and not get hurt, in order to succeed. And some of these patterns are healthy, and some of them are not so healthy. So for instance, when I was growing up, my stepdad was often angry and would yell and sometimes throw things, which were unhealthy patterns that he learned from his family of origin that were really hard to break as much as he loved us. But my learned pattern when he started yelling and throwing in order to self-protect was to shut up and hide. And it was really a very successful strategy while growing up as a child in a home where you don't have a lot of power. But as an adult, this strategy that I learned is not effective for conflict resolution, nor is it the path of conflict resolution God teaches. And it caused a lot of issues at the beginning of my marriage. Just because I was a Christian and just because I knew that this was not God's way did not immediately change my long-lived ingrained habits. Anytime my husband and I started to disagree or anything got vaguely passionate or heated, I would immediately pick up this old pattern of self-protection and shut down. And it's really hard to resolve a conflict when you won't talk to someone or engage, as my poor husband frustratingly found out. And what I was running into was my shallow roots. I was a Christian. I wanted to be new. I wanted to do conflict differently than in my family of origin. But when problems arose, when things got challenging or stressful or upsetting, I immediately fell away from anything I had learned from God and went to my default setting, shutting up and shutting down. And I'm sure that you have default patterns like this too, that you rely on when you get stressed or angry or hurt, that are maybe not particularly loving or Christ-like or gentle or self-controlled. And it's because we're all running into shallow roots. When problems arise, we fall away from God's way and we revert to old family patterns of doing things. I needed deeper roots in order to overcome this default setting when problems arose, and you do too. Now, obviously, one of the solutions to the negative patterns or pain that surface when we encounter problems is to decide, well, I just can't have any problems. And this is a strategy that many people adopt. And people who adopt this strategy often rely on leaving to avoid problems. And the patriarchs of the Bible, they were notorious for using this strategy. So if this is you, you're in good company. Sarah feels judged by Hagar. Problem. Solution, well, you banish that problem to the desert, and then you don't have to feel judged anymore. Jacob manipulated and deceived his brother Esau and caused some interpersonal conflict. Well, instead of apologizing or owning your fault, you just run away from the problem, and you don't see that problem again for decades. Feeling overlooked or undervalued, jealous of someone else, big problem. You could take the problem-solving route of Joseph's brothers and simply try and kill the problem. Trying to leave problems and conflicts is an age-old solution that many of us still use today. For instance, maybe you don't see eye to eye with your friend. Well, gotta ditch that. Block them on social media and ghost hard. Your workplace isn't what you thought it would be. Peace out and find a new job. Your church hurts your feelings or makes a mistake. Good thing there's lots of them, and you can just leave and go somewhere else. But shockingly, constantly leaving doesn't avoid problems, because God promises that problems are inherent to life. In John 16, he tells us, in this world, you will have trouble. Not might, not maybe, you will. Wherever you go, whichever town you live in, whatever church you attend, whichever people you befriend, whatever person you marry, whatever job you do, there will be problems. Jesus says that the solution to problems is not running from them and trying to find this non-existent problem-free zone. And the solution is also not falling back on what you learned from your family of origin. Instead, the solution is to grow deep roots. Romans 12:2 reminds us, don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, i.e. what you learned in your family of origin or the leaving and running around you that people do, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. We keep running into issues and not feeling like new people because we are still copying the behaviors and customs of this world, because we're still resetting to the factory default of our families of origin when things get tough or stressful, because we're still running and leaving and looking for a place or a person or a community without problems that simply does not exist. We can't have a stress-free, problem-free life, but we can let God transform us into new people. And this is how Jesus says we do that. Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden that I give is light. Gentle, humble, easy, light. These are the things that we want our lives marked by, the things that we find elusive and like they're just not quite clicking. And these are the things Jesus says that he can teach us. But it's going to mean doing things differently. A yoke is how you carry something heavy. And all of us carry our lives. And like you may be experiencing or have experienced, our lives are often heavy. What Jesus is offering to us is not a problem or stress-free life, but a different way to carry life that feels light and easy. So to help you understand this, imagine that you have a small toddler to carry. What do they weigh? Like 25 pounds? This one might weigh more than that, but ultimately not that heavy. But say that you have to carry this toddler all the way through Disneyland. The weight of that child will not change, plus or minus a few Mickey-shaped churros. But how you carry said child will greatly affect the burden on you. Okay, option A. You can hold the child by 1 foot out in front of you, or as Ryan kindly did, by 2 feet. When we took this picture, I literally could not carry Aiden this way. I don't have enough upper body strength, so Ryan had to do it. But ultimately, this is not a very efficient way to carry a load. You will exhaust before even making it out of the parking lot. Option B. You can cradle the child in your arms like a baby. Maybe they'll fall asleep and drool on your shirt. It's more efficient than option A, but I promise you, your arms will be on fire before you even hit the castle. Option C. You can wear a backpack carrier that distributes the weight over your hips, which is arguably adding more weight than either of the first two options, but shockingly allows you to walk all throughout Disneyland bearing the burden of that child. Again, the weight of the child has not changed in each of these scenarios, but how you shoulder the load, how you wear the yoke changes everything. And this is what Jesus is saying. Let me teach you. Let me show you how to carry life in a way that is light and easy instead of exhausting. Let me give you a backpack carrier for that toddler-sized burden in your arms. Life is heavy when you're bitter and angry, when you care what everyone else thinks, when you're worried if people are judging you, when you're anxious about the future, when you're unforgiving and isolated. Let me show you a different way to deal with the problems of life, different patterns of behavior that will transform your behavior, your character, yourself into a new person. And this new person can carry life lightly. And you may be thinking, Megan, that sounds great. And I think that's what I've been doing. Haven't I been trying to follow Jesus all of this time? Hadn't I been trying to be more loving and forgiving and graceful and peaceful and all the things Jesus tells me to do, but it doesn't seem to be working? How do I let God transform me deeply and not just at the surface? It goes back to the parable of the seed. We have to develop deep roots. Now, I'm going to warn you, diving deep is both incredibly simple, but also incredibly hard. This is what Jesus has to say about it. If any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way. Take up your cross daily and follow me. If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, you will save it. Whatever way you currently deal with problems, whatever way you currently shoulder the load of life, Jesus says you're going to have to give it up. And it seems like a no-brainer. Like, yeah, I'm up for that. I'll give it up. But think carefully about what giving up your own way means. It means actually doing the hard work of identifying, reliving, processing, grieving, forgiving, and letting go of ingrained habits and patterns, ways of acting and family scripts that are at the bedrock of your character and way of life. It often means going to therapy or getting a good counselor, someone who can help you identify and work through patterns that you might not even recognize. It means letting go of the prestige or workaholism or numbing behaviors that you've adopted to shoulder life and drown out the pain and bolster your self-esteem. It means actually feeling the pain that you've been running from, actually wrestling with your self-worth and self-esteem. It means letting go of being right and having other people know that you're right. It means staying put when you want to run away. It means letting go of your desire to be comfortable and to not feel negative emotions. It means saying no. It means letting go of freedom and choosing to live within structure and discipline. It means letting go of the noise that you fill your life with, the hectic pace that leaves no margin. It means being raw and vulnerable and clear. Giving up your own way is hard, and it is often very painful. Because our way is kind of like slapping a Band-Aid on a giant wound and then snapping at anyone who accidentally bumps into us, popping Advil so you don't have to feel the throbbing pain. It is a solution and a way to get through the hurts and hangups of life, but it is not very effective. And Jesus' way is actually healing it. But to do that, it's going to hurt and be messy. You're going to have to root into that pus-filled, infected wound, and it will hurt and it will not be pretty. It will be raw and open and vulnerable. It will take time and repeated washings and space and air and maybe even stitches to heal. Letting go of our way and how we want to deal with life is not easy, but it is better. You can feel that how you carry life right now, the way that you're doing it does not result in what you want. Easy, light, gentle, free. The path forward is to go Jesus' way, but I'm not going to lie to you and say that it's easier or less painful at first. It's not. In fact, it will feel harder and more painful at first, like diving into that infected wound and cleaning it out, but it will actually heal your life in a way that Band-Aids and snapping at people and popping Advil never will. And this might sound impossible, and you're like, yeah, maybe I'm not sure that I want to do that. Maybe it is too hard. But I want to give you an example of a truly transformed life that started in a super broken place to show you how possible and how worth it is. So do you remember all of those patriarchs that we talked about earlier who dealt with problems by leaving and lying, anger and killing, not resolving conflict and taking it out on other people? Well, it was into this messed up and broken family, just like your family and my family, hopefully with a little less killing, that Joseph was born into. And he learned all of his default settings here. You lie, you numb, you run, you look down on others, you act selfishly. Other people are always to blame. It's not you. He inherited it all, just like we do. But then everything changed when problems arose and the solution of running was no longer possible. Joseph ended up in prison for a crime he didn't commit, in a country his brothers betrayed him to, alone, stripped of any status, work, friends, avenues of numbing or noise to cover up the pain. And he stayed in this hard and difficult place for 10 years, which is a long time to have to sit and face your crap without any of the crutches we rely on. It was not easy. In the 10 years Joseph spent alone with himself and God in prison, Joseph had to wrestle with his past, his learned patterns of living, what made him valuable and worthy, how he had tried to earn people's love and esteem. He had to wrestle with what he envisioned a good life to be that was no longer available to him. He grieved, he mourned, he got angry, he was hurt, but he was vulnerable, and he brought it all to God. In 10 years of silence and seclusion and wrestling, Joseph surrendered his own way and he adopted God's way. He laid down his life the way that he wanted it, the way that he envisioned it, the way his family had done life for generations, and instead he picked up Jesus' yoke. It was deep, profound change. And we see the fruit of this change years and years later when he gets a chance to face his abusers and his betrayers, and he makes this incredible choice. Joseph could stand it no longer. There were many people in the room, and he said to his attendants, "Out, all of you." So he was alone with his brothers when he told them who he was. Then he broke down and wept. He wept so loudly the Egyptians could hear him, and word of it quickly carried to Pharaoh's palace. And he said to them, "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into slavery in Egypt. But don't be upset and don't be angry with yourselves for selling me to this place. It was God who sent me here ahead of you to preserve your lives. God has sent me ahead of you to keep you and your families alive and to preserve many survivors. So it was God who sent me here, not you. And he is the one who made me an advisor to Pharaoh, the manager of his entire palace and the governor of all Egypt. Now hurry back to my father and tell him, this is what your son Joseph says. God has made me master of all the land of Egypt, so come down to me immediately. You can live in the region of Goshen, where you can be near me with all your children and grandchildren, your flocks and herds and everything you own. I will take care of you there." Weeping with joy, he embraced Benjamin, and Benjamin did the same. Then Joseph kissed each of his brothers and wept over them. Can you imagine facing your abusers, betrayers, the people who hurt you and ruined your life, and weeping over them with joy? This is the response of a deeply transformed life. This is Christ incarnate in a person. Your responses to others, your depths of love and gentleness, your perspective on the goodness of your life and God's faithfulness towards you can be deeply transformed just like this. But how did Joseph experience profound, deep change that rewired all of his default settings and transformed him into the image of Christ? It was by being with God. Jesus says this, "Remain in me, and I will remain in you. For a branch cannot produce fruit if it is severed from the vine, and you cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. Yes, I am the vine and you are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing." Nothing. You cannot be more loving, more graceful, more peaceful, less angry, less judgmental, more self-controlled by just trying harder. This is why we live shallow lives. This is why we don't experience the deep, transformative change that Jesus says is possible, the abundant life marked by love that he claims is the Christian life in him, because we are not in him. We're just trying to do it harder ourselves. And we will always go back to our default or simply run away if we don't develop deep roots in him. We cannot produce fruit in our lives on our own. And maybe you don't grow much fruit. We live in a desert, and we're not an agrarian society anymore. But I've been trying to keep a little lime tree alive in our backyard since last year. And I've been reading a little bit about growing things because, as I have confessed before, I kill all green things, and I don't want to kill my lime tree. I love it. But in reading about citrus fruit, it's amazing that the fruit is all about the water. A tree will not produce fruit unless it has sufficient, abundant water. And as soon as the water goes away, the first thing the tree does is drop all the fruit and abandon it. Fruit is only possible when the tree is deeply connected to continual overflowing sources of water. And this is what we're called to do in our lives. We don't have to try harder. We just have to grow deep roots to reach out and touch the source of living water, God Himself. We touch Him, we connect to Him over and over, day after day, leaving the tendrils and roots of our lives grounded deeply to Him. And that's it. I told you it was simple, though not easy. And Jesus promises that if we remain deeply rooted in Him, then He will produce fruit in us. You naturally will be fruitful, a life heavy with love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, and self-control. That is the heaviness of a deeply watered soul, deeply rooted in the source of living water, not brittle and dry, but overflowing and abundant and a gift to everyone around it. And I think that's what's so beautiful about going deep with God, is that it's not just about ourselves. Obviously, that's the first and maybe selfishly most gratifying result, is that our lives are suddenly carried the way that Jesus says they can be, lightly, easily, joyfully. It is wonderful to not be angry at people, to not walk around with that sick, icky feeling in your chest. It is wonderful to feel light and joyful, and each day is this fabulous gift from God. The fruit of being deeply connected to God tastes so good and feels so good. But it also tastes so good and feels so good for others. What a gift it is to be around a non-anxious person. What a gift it is to be around someone who feels so deeply centered in love that they can be fully present to you and not be trying to impress you or one-up you. What a gift it is to be around someone who is secure and humble and gentle. What a wonderful person to disagree with and have an argument with. Someone who's not reactive, who doesn't try to tear you down and hurt you with their words just to make a point. Someone who actually listens to you and respects you. What a gift to be around someone who sees everyone as worthy and with dignity, since they know their own worth and dignity. What a husband this kind of person would make. What a mother. What a boss this would be. What a fabulous employee. What an amazing professor or research partner or cashier or blogger. Can you imagine being in a whole family of people like this, where it's normal to be kind to each other, where people bring up what's bothering them and resolve it with kindness? Can you imagine being in a friend group like this, where people legitimately care about each other just because they care about the person? Can you imagine being in a church where people are like this, where there's so much fruit just raining from the trees around you that you feel rejuvenated and at peace just by being around? Because you see, it was not just Joseph who benefited from his deeply transformed life, arising from his deep, deep roots in God. It was his forgiven brothers, his cared for family, the saving of the whole nation of Egypt because of the fruit of his deep connection with God. When we are deeply watered by the source of living water, it transforms us, our community, and the whole world that we live in. This is how the kingdom comes. This is how heaven comes to earth, not by changing out there, but by changing in here. This is why deep is such a crucial value to our church. We recognize that Jesus has called us deeper than surface level dabbling. We believe that Jesus is offering a whole new way, a way of deep roots, deeply connected to him, that results in the easy, light, gentle, loving, abundant life he says is possible. And we believe that it is people who are deeply transformed by Christ that make decisions of unity and being with and serving others and inviting the world to follow Jesus. We believe that the world is transformed by deeply transformed people. The degree to which we as individuals embrace deep roots in Christ determines the degree to which we can fulfill all these other values that are important to us, because it all goes back to Jesus. We can do nothing apart from him. And if we want to see the kingdom come realized here in our community, in our beautiful city of Tucson, in our red-bricked university, in our amazing world, God has to be realized in us first. This is Paul's prayer. I pray that from his glorious, unlimited resources, he will empower you with inner strength through his Spirit. Then Christ will make his home in your hearts as you trust in him. Your roots will grow down into God's love and keep you strong. And may you have the power to understand, as all God's people should, how wide, how long, how high, and how deep his love is. May you experience the love of Christ, though it is too great to understand fully. And then you will be made complete with all of the fullness of life and power that comes from God. The change we want to see, the life we want to live, it all comes from God and being deeply rooted in his deep, deep love for you. Yes, it is that simple. And yes, it is that hard. It is the only way to deep transformation. So how do you grow deep roots in God's love? Jesus already told us, remain in him. It's that simple. Plants grow deep roots by always searching for water. If you are habitually and regularly reaching out to touch God, the source of living water, your roots will grow deeper. Most plants don't thrive well by being dumped on once a year and then not having a drop of water for the rest. So you need to connect with God regularly. Most plants do well with consistent, regular connection with a source of water, and plants that have deeper and more robust connections fare even better. It's okay to get creative in ways to connect. Plants do all sorts of crazy things to connect to water, but also feel free to rely on the staples like reading your Bible and praying and going to church, whatever ways water you regularly. And I want to invite you to choose one new way to connect to God to add to your week. It doesn't matter if you currently connect to God a lot or a little bit, another route is always helpful. Maybe commit to actually watching church every week. Maybe commit to actually going to a small group every week. Maybe commit to actually doing a Bible reading plan with our church. Schedule it on your calendar, right after your 9 a.m. class. Read my Bible. Or make a promise with yourself or your roommate, if you're not very self-controlled, that you have to finish your day's reading before you can turn on Netflix. Whatever actually works for you to regularly start connecting to Jesus. And this will not be life-changing overnight or over the next month. Think about how long it takes a tree to grow. Think about how long Joseph was in prison. A tree needs to be watered for years and years before it gets old enough and robust enough to even start thinking about growing peaches. And that's why I want you to choose something that you are actually willing to commit to and stick with. Because it really doesn't matter what the thing is. The actual activity that connects you to God is not the important thing. What is important is connecting to him, the life-giving source of water, over and over, habitually, regularly, consistently. This is so important that our whole next series is devoted to helping you connect to Jesus. It's 5 weeks, and you might be thinking, 5 weeks on deeply connecting to the source of life and love, is that overkill? We don't think so, because your relationship to Jesus is the foundation of everything. It is what everything's about. And so if you feel a little lost for ideas or not sure where to start, don't worry, we've got you. We're going to do a whole series on it. We will help you. Because even though deep transformation happens in our personal reaching out to God, we do it together. We do it as a church, as a community who loves and supports and encourages one another on this journey of life. The church community helps us heal and go deep because it is a safe place where we can tell the truth and be seen for who we are. You don't have to go it alone. We are all here helping each other go deep. And God promises that if we connect to him, he is faithful to keep changing and transforming us the deeper we root in him. And I am certain that God, who began the good work with you, will continue his work until it is finally finished on the day when Christ Jesus returns. It may feel hard in the way that surrender and giving up your own way always feels hard, but it is a good work in you. And God will slowly, gently, and lovingly transform you more and more into a new person. Someone who carries life lightly, who experiences the abundance and joy Jesus promises, a person who looks an awful lot like Jesus. And I want to close with our statement of our value of transformation. Jesus changes everything. And he invites us not just into intellectual assent, but into an entirely new way of life. We lay down our attitudes and character, values and family scripts, and thoughts and actions in faith. When we choose him, we begin a process of deep transformation that is only possible through the Spirit leading us, teaching us new rhythms of grace and practices that align us with God and reflect Christ. Let's choose to grow deep roots, to remain in Jesus, and be deeply transformed people that are made new. Let's pray. God, I lift up everyone here. We know that it is hard to dive deep and to let go of our own way and the ways that we've been dealing with the problems in our lives and the solutions that we've come up, keep reverting back to our old family defaults. And we don't want to live like that anymore, God, because it's not resulting in the life that you say is possible, Lord. We want to taste and feel and live out the abundance and the joy and the peace that you talk about, God. And we recognize that it is following your way and deeply connecting to you that results in the life that really matters, a deeply transformed and new life, God. I ask for strength and courage to make the hard choices to give up our own way, to commit to something that connects to you. And recognizing that it is not an overnight transformation and not this magic cure love, Lord, but that it is a relationship with you. It is intimacy with you that takes time and energy and focus and intentionality. But we also recognize that it's the best way to do life. I ask for your healing, God, for us to know and experience how wide and deep your love is. Help us to be a community of deeply transformed people. In your name we pray, amen.
Thank you for joining the Damascus Road podcast. Our mission is to follow Jesus together by being with God, loving everyone, transforming people, developing leaders, growing new ministries, and changing the world. You can find out more about us online at DamascusRoadTucson.com.